On today's show, sometimes you gotta be bold. Sometimes you gotta tap into your inner clairvoyant essence. Folks, we're doing some predictions for the 2025 Padres, from the pitching to the batting to the defense to the miscellaneous to the not so obvious to the obvious, and a whole lot more. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Thursday, February 27th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. We'll be ramping those accounts up more and more as we get closer to opening day, which is, I cannot emphasize enough, it's going to be here before you know it, guys. It's right around the corner. So pack your bags, get your food loaded and everything, and let's strap on, everybody. Today's show, we're going to be talking about some bold predictions for the 2025 Padres, and some not so bold. Just talk about them a little bit, because I think that there's, as usual, any number of outcomes for this team. You know what I mean? They're not safe. They are a team that has been really back and forth over the past few years, and they have a lot of different player variants, especially among their stars, and I can see a world in which they're really fantastic. I could see a world where they're fantastic, or where they're really bad, and we're like, my God, once again, the Padres lost out on everything. They should have beat the Dodgers. You should have killed them when you had the chance. But we'll see how that all breaks down, guys. But we're going to start with kind of batting and whatnot, and I want to preface this by saying that, like, it's funny because I did do like a search. I was like, has anyone else done their like predictions yet and whatnot? And I find the whole like Tatis will win MVP to be really boring. Dylan Cease will win the Cy Young. Like, people sometimes do bold predictions and they're not really that bold, and especially when they're for the people covering the team or the fans of the team, right? Like when Braves fans are like, Ronald Acuna Jr. is actually going to be bounce back and be amazing. Not that interesting. If it's a national writer who covers all things and one of their predictions is about the Braves, that's a little bit more interesting. So I wanted to kind of give my best ones that I could come up with, at least at this juncture, right? Because I think that there's also another thing with the Padres is things can change very, very quickly, right? We could see trades by the deadline. We could see no trades by the deadline. We could see them go for some things. And I wanted to talk about some of my predictions. So we'll do that, because who doesn't like predictions? It's fun. And if any of these come true, you guys owe me. I don't know what you owe me exactly, but we'll figure that out as we get there. First thing, let's start with the offensive side of things. Let's start with position players. First thing I want to talk about is one that I don't actually think is all that bold. We'll start very nice and simple. I think Luis Arraez will win the batting title. Again, his fourth in a row, and he will surpass Jose Altuve and tie Miguel Cabrera for the most by not ever, right? Like if you look it up, like Ty Cobb won a ton, right? Like but in today's game, in which batting average isn't really like the biggest be all and end all, right? Like we don't have those Herculean 380 batters necessarily as much as we used to. I think Luis Arraez will make some sort of history there. I think he'll get his fourth, and Altuve, I believe, has 3. Miguel Cabrera with 4, including the infamous Triple Crown season. Now, I don't think Luis Arraez is going to do that. I still think it's going to be pretty cool, and I still think it's a pretty wild thing to unfold. I think Luis Arraez, like, if he's a guy who can hit above 100 WRC plus, have a 300 plus batting average, and he's like missing a thumb, I really think that like this guy is going to be incredible. Now, was he an all-star last year? And some people would debate whether or not he should have been. Sure. But I think overall, I think he's going to have a really good campaign. He's going to be a free agent after this year. And in general, the free agent thing, that's something kind of wild about this Padres team, is they have a lot of free agents heading into this offseason with Luis Arraez, with Dylan Cease and Michael King, who we'll get into a little bit later. Like, you can't say that they're not motivated, right? Like, they have a lot of players on this team that it's like, all right, they want to, get paid and whatnot. Even Jason Adam, I believe, is a free agent next year. So there is a lot of reason to have hope that at least at the very minimum, guys are going to want to perform. They always want to perform, but at least there might be a little bit of an edge this year. Almost like, dare I say, one last dance, even though they've never actually had the big dance whatsoever. So Luis Arraez winning his 4th straight batting title, that would be awesome. I actually was tempted, but I didn't want to be mean, to say he'll win his 4th straight batting title, but with a different team. You know what I mean? That would be nuts if Luis Arraez went from Twins, Marlins, Padres to then, let's say, Mariners, right? Let's just say Mariners. that if all that happened, right, and he won the batting title each year, it would be the ultimate, like, boomers just losing their mind, and, like, older folks who just look at batting average losing their mind. They're like, how does this guy keep getting traded? And the reason is defense, and he doesn't walk as much as we would like to. But I do think he's going to have a very, very good season. But just, no, I was very tempted to say Luis Arraez would his 4th straight batting title, but it'd be for his 4th straight different team consecutively. That's the prediction. For all you general baseball field, that's the prediction. But next one up I've got is, I think Tatis, once again, will swipe less than 20 bases. Last year, now, and this has been a thing for a while. This is more like a fantasy prediction. I think this helps more. I'm not saying stolen bases are irrelevant, but in today's game, with the amount of, like, how we've seen that, like, there's been an increase in stolen bases. The pickoff move is not used as much, right? I get that. Right? But Tatis only stole 11 bags in 102 games last year. Before that, he was a 29 guy, 25, 11 in 2020 in just 59 games, 16 in 84 games in 2019. I actually think he might only steal like 10 bases. And the big reason I think that is because I just don't think he's going to run nearly as much. I think he's really, really, really trying to stay healthy. Now, do I love that? No. I'm trying to be bold, and the bold part about this, because you might be thinking, well, it's not like this guy's, Jazz Chisholm. He's not Ellie De La Cruz stealing 70 bags a year or whatever. I know, but one thing that we know about the Fernando Tatis Jr. is that he was working through like a leg abductor strain, or I forgot what it was called exactly, in his right leg. And they said he was at like 60% with that last year. So that might be a big contribution to why he wasn't stealing bases. But I think it's still going to happen. I think he maybe steals like only 12 bags. I think he's going to be going more for power, and he's going to be using his speed more so like just trying to score runs from first base and whatnot. I don't think he's going to be as big a demon on the base paths. And in general, I don't think this team will be all that deadly on the base paths. I think they're going to be a little bit more slow and steady. Manny Machado loves randomly like stealing bases. You know what I mean? I could see a world in which Manny Machado randomly steals more bases than Fernando Tatis Jr. I mean, he stole 11 last year, right? Like, I would not be shocked if he did that. Or Xander Bogaerts even. Xander Bogaerts is also not a stolen base guy, but he does have speed, right? So it wouldn't surprise me either if he went out and done that. I think that's what I might say is Xander Bogaerts is going to steal more bases than Fernando Tatis Jr. next year. Let's change the prediction to that right now. Xander Bogaerts is going to steal more bags than Fernando Tatis Jr. in 2025. I think he wants to stay healthy, and I think that this happens a lot with players. Right? I understand that Ronald Acuna did the 50-50 season or whatever it was a few years ago. I understand that. But overall, I think that when guys are dealing with health, this has been a trend that I've noticed as guys stop running a bit. Maybe they'll get back to it, right? A 40-70 season that Acuna had, right? I think he'll just take it pretty easy on the base paths. I think he wants to stay healthy because that's been the biggest problem with him for a long time, right? All the underlying metrics are there. Maybe he's not the Griffey that we thought he might be 3 years ago, but he could still be an MVP candidate. I think a big part of that will be him staying healthy. And I think that his defense should pick up a lot too. He'll use his speed in that regard. Speaking of defense though, Xander Bogaerts, I think he's going to have a good defensive season. I don't think he's going to be necessarily a Gold Glove type of player, but I could see it. I think he's going to finish with at least in advanced metrics, a plus number at defensive runs saved, and more importantly, the outs above average. I think he's going to sit at a positive like +6 in that regard, and it's going to be great. I think that with the Padres, there is a lot of questions about defense on this team, because in theory, they could be a great defensive team. Tatis is a Platinum Glove winner. Jackson Merrill won the Gold Glove. Jason Hayward, he's not going to be an everyday player, but he's usually very, very good, or at least that's what's keeping him in the game, really, is his defense. He's always been a pretty good defensive player. And then you've got Manny Machado at third base. Now, he's weird because he's actually vacillated back and forth between being a good defender and not, in terms of like the advanced stats. I think he's always a good defender, but these past couple of years, he had 0 outs above average last year, but then 12 the year before that, right? So I see a world in which Manny Machado is very good. I could see Bogaerts being good. I think Jake Cronenworth can be very good. I actually think Jake Cronenworth has a better opportunity potentially at maybe being a Gold Glove nominee and whatnot, right? But I think all in all, it's kind of what I'm looking at. I think Xander Bogaerts is going to have a very good defensive season. And if he does, that basically, in my opinion, only gives 2 positions where the Padres could be negative defensively. That's catcher, because of Campuzano and Elias Diaz, especially in the form of the former. and then at first base with Luis Arraez, unless something happens with your Connor Joes, right? Unless something weird happens, and unless Arraez randomly figures out how to play defense at first base. Crazier things have happened, but I do not see it. So that's what I'm going to say with Xander Bogaerts for now. And you know what, man? I would be very happy if the Padres are a good defensive team. Last year, they were actually randomly not very good, right? Tatis didn't have the best metrics. Left field, obviously with Profar, we kind of knew that was going to happen. You were a mess behind catcher. And then Machado, like I said last year, randomly, like 0 outs above average, did not have the best defensive season that we've seen from him. But nonetheless, I still think there's some hope. There's some hope, ladies and gentlemen. And speaking of hope, we've got some other predictions that will be positive heading your way in just a minute, guys. But first, I need to take a second to play some words from our sponsors. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast. A little bit of that was a rough transition there. That was a little bit weird, but nonetheless, we are back here on Locked On Padres. Just talked about some of my predictions so far. Xander Bogaerts being a plus defender, 6 outs above average. We also talked about Arraez winning the batting title, and Tatis being, he'll steal less bags than Xander Bogaerts next year. My last one, in terms of batters, in terms of strictly batters, Jake Cronenworth. I think he's going to be a 3.5 to 3.8 win player by Fangraphs projections this next year. There's a couple reasons for this. Number one is the obvious, which is that he's returning back to second base. And last year, he actually was a pretty good player, all things considered. I think he can put that together for the majority of the season, though. Jake Cronenworth did fall off a bit when it came to the second half as the season went along, because, and I'm not even like just saying that, like he really did kind of fall off. And at the beginning of the year, he was mashing. It's one of the more under-discussed things about last year's season is Jake Cronenworth was absolutely killing the ball. He was hitting it a lot better. He just looked really, really strong in that beginning of the season. 122 WRC plus in March and April, and then 117 in May. Then he had a 106 in June. Then he slowed down big time in July, having 71. Then in August, had a 120. All in all, he had a 113 in the first half, 93 in the second half. I think him moving back to second base, I can see him putting together a much more consistent season. And I think because of what we've talked about, where you need to really be an offensive beast to provide a lot of F-WAR at first base, even still, he's still put together, even with all that. Even though he didn't have necessarily like the most incredible season, he still put together a 2-win season at first base. He's still a good player. And I still believe that we can get something really good out of him. And him playing majority of his time at second base, I think he's going to get used to being better again. His expo WOBA was better than his weighted on base ended up being. 2 wins above replacement. I don't necessarily think he's going to hit like 25 home runs or anything like that. I think he hits around 17, 15 like he usually does. But I think being back on second is going to be big for him. His defensive value is going to be up. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in a Gold Glove contention. And lastly, this is like a little bit more of a me reading too much of the Charlie Day pin-to-pin connections, but I really do think it says something that, according to Dennis Lin of The Athletic, that teams have reached out and he has drawn trade interest, even with the contract. And I think that's because teams know $11 million a year is not that bad because they're using him wrong, and he should be used at second base. That's where he can really thrive, be better defensively. It's where he's more comfortable. And before all this, remember, he was in the top 5 in wins above replacement among all second basemen heading into the 2023 season, right? 2023 was a mess, right? He only played 127 games. He missed a lot of time. He was really bad at the plate. It was rough, right? But overall, before that, he was a 3.7 win player in 2022, 3.7 in 2021, and 1.9 in 2020, although 2020 is the season you got to throw out. But overall, heading into that, before they moved him to first base, he was top 5 in wins above replacement on second baseman. I think teams know they're using him wrong, and that excites me. That tells me teams are like, oh, the Padres are like, we shouldn't just sell this guy low. Like, he's going to be good, and we're going to play him at second base. So that's my prediction for that. Let's talk about pitching, though. Not nearly as many predictions, but I'm going to go with this one. Yuki Matsui is going to be the team's best reliever by the end of the season. I've talked a lot about why I'm really high on Yuki Matsui. This is bold because I know it's tempting. I know that some people are going to say, dude, it's going to be Estrada. It's going to be Estrada. I know. But I don't think that that's that bold. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised if Jeremiah Estrada, I wouldn't even be surprised if Robert Suarez were to be traded, right? And then potentially they're like Jeremiah Estrada slots in, and then it's Yuki Matsui following, or Sean Reynolds, or any number of other relievers that they have. I would not be surprised by that. Yuki Matsui, though, he didn't have the best season, and I know that Zips doesn't love him. I get it. I don't care. You know what I mean? There's a lot of players that Zips doesn't love. But also, they have Jason Adam. They have Adrian Morejon. I think Yuki Matsui ends up the best reliever on this team because I think his stuff is a lot better than people realize. Nobody can hit it. If he works with Ruben Niebla more, if they develop him better, I think as long as he watches the elevation of that fastball, guys were not hitting his best pitches. They were not hitting that split finger fastball. They were not hitting low and away. They just couldn't. They couldn't. So if he just tinkers with a couple things, I think Yuki Matsui has a great season. I think he could have one of the lowest ERAs among any reliever there. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the best overall player. Sometimes relievers get lucky, right? But I think he's going to be great. Part of that could be a Robert Suarez trade, but in general, that's what I see for Yuki Matsui. I've been really, really high on him for a long time. I like that the stuff is there. And I think he gave up stuff at the worst time. Maybe it was nerves, but one thing we learned heading back into last year, high leverage, do in clutch situations and all that stuff. If you're really, really bad in that area, it tends to flip the next year. So I think Yuki Matsui is not going to be nearly as disastrous as he was in all the high leverage situations last year. I just don't think that that's going to happen 2 years in a row, right? I could be wrong. I could be dead wrong. A lot of you are like, Javi, you are a fool. What is wrong with you? This guy had a FIP of 5.51 in high leverage situations last year. It's going to continue again. I don't think it does. I think things are going to be a lot more evened out in higher leverage situations this year, and he's going to figure out that fastball placement. So Yuki Matsui, best reliever for the Padres. That's right. We're going bold today, folks. That's what we do here. Next one. Nick Pivetta will make the National League All-Star game is my next one. There's a couple reasons for this. We talked about this on the big breakdown. You guys can go see past episodes where I talked more in depth about Nick Pivetta, but what he's done has been nothing short of just quietly emerging as a really good starter. He was one of the players that I wanted heading into the offseason with my wish list. And this isn't just a player who, oh wow, he looked pretty good last year and all that stuff. He really did add and change some things, especially over the last 2 seasons, right? He made adjustments to his slider and turned it a little bit more to a sweeper, more horizontal break and all that stuff. And since from 2023 to 2024, with a minimum of at least 120 innings pitched, Nick Pivetta had the 8th best strikeout rate in baseball, folks. That's pretty good. The 8th best strikeout rate from those 2 seasons combined. This is a discovery of something. And you might be wondering, well, how did the Padres get him so late? It's because of the qualified pick, the qualifying offer, teams lose a draft pick. And remember, this is baseball where teams are super cheap. So they might value picks a lot more than they should. Frankly, all teams in all sports value picks way more than they should. But I think that was part of it. I think the deal wasn't out there that he wanted. And we've seen this happen before. Blake Snell didn't get the deal that he wanted. Starting pitching market gets weird sometimes. You know what I mean? Frankly, the market in general gets weird sometimes. So I think with the 8th best strikeout rate over that time, his Sierra dropped to 3.4 in both of those seasons. Sierra is a little bit more complicated. We don't have to get into that now, but that suggests that he's going to improve as well. In general, I'm getting a little bit Musgrove vibes. And I don't mean that in terms of the stuff. Much different pitcher. That's not what I'm saying. The fastball and the sweeper. Musgrove toys with you. He throws that little curveball and he does a changeup. Like, he does all that stuff, right? I remember heading into the 2021 season, and I should have said it instead of my infamous Trent Grisham bold prediction. There was something about, like, is he going to be great? Because a lot of people are like, this guy's numbers and underlying metrics are great. Don't just pay attention to the ERA. And he turned out to be exactly that. I think the Padres might have gotten in on the ground floor on another player. So I think he's going to be an all-star. That doesn't mean he'll be the best pitcher on the Padres, right? I just think that he could start off great for this team. And I think with Petco, with the Sierra, with the strikeout rate, with the fact that he just throws innings a lot, I think he's going to be really, really deadly this season. I don't know if it'll keep up for the whole season, right? But I think with Niebla's tutelage and all of that stuff, I think he's going to be awesome. I think he will be an all-star this season. And I mean, literally make the all-star team, right? Like, and that's always a little bit unpredictable. There's always some guys that sneak in there that nobody expected. I think Nick Pivetta will be one of them. And a lot of people will be wondering, like, why did this guy sign late? We overthought this. The Padres knew he was on the verge of getting even better. All the trends suggest that he would be. So that's mine. And that's it for pitching, guys. But we've got a bunch more predictions. We've got just a few more, actually. Not too many. We've got not too many. that we're going to talk about, guys. I can't lie. Not too many. But they're going to be fun. And we like to have fun on this year's show. But first, I need to take a second, one more second, to talk to you about one of our sponsors. Folks, let me tell you something as I drink my water because I forgot I was coming back in. I love stuff that makes it easier for me to get through the day when it comes to food, man. I really do. And I like it not only because it keeps me satisfied, right? But it's also really yummy and it's nutritious. And that's what the good folks over at Wonderful Pistachios have created. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to keep you feeling fuller longer, folks. I love that. I'm trying to lose weight a little bit, trying to be a little bit more in shape. And every time I get that little urge, pistachios, they're right there for me, man. They're there for me. I love the snack that's always there for me. It's great. No shells, Wonderful Pistachios are also very good. They grab and go with ease. You don't have to crack them and whatnot. I personally do like the crack. I love that. I love that very much. But they've got all sorts of different flavors as well. So, folks, what are you waiting for? Get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Bill, remember to follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, and send me your questions. We will be answering next Monday. Whatever you guys want to ask. I love reading your comments, love reading your DMs, love reading your tweets, all that sort of stuff. So check that out. Some last few predictions for the Padres in 2025. And apologies if they haven't, gotten you going so far. Look, I want it to be different. I think it's really boring when I Google Padres bold predictions and someone's like Tatis MVP. I'm like, well, yeah, he's our best player. Like, he's finished third once. You know what I mean? Like, so it wouldn't be that surprising. Here we go. Leodis DeVries. DeVries, you know who I'm talking about. The Padres' top prospect or second top prospect, whatever. I think he's going to be like a consensus top 5 guy by the end of the year. His bat speed, his power, his eye at the plate, for him to be doing what he's doing at his age, I know it's at high A, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just rare, man. It's just rare. I think that this guy's got an attitude to play the position. I think he's an all-around really good player. And when I start hearing Ketel Marte and Francisco Lindor type of comparisons, this is a guy that you don't trade. And I think there's a reason why reportedly last year at the deadline, the organization was like, no, Preller, you cannot trade DeVries. You just can't. We're not doing it. Like, these are the type of prospects that, in general, I don't think teams trade anymore, right? And the Padres, if they've shown one thing, is that Preller knows how to scout and find talent. And when it comes to the international pool, he does that really well. And I think that what we're seeing overall in baseball is you're just not getting teams' golden eggs. You can get their interesting good players, right? Like, I think you could get your, let's say the Orioles, for example. That's why I talked about them in the offseason as a potential Dylan Cease team, that you could potentially get your Chase McDermott's, right? Like, I think you could potentially do that. But can you get their Kobe Mayos? No, they're just not trading those guys anymore. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense because at minimum, teams think you're at least getting like 2-win players there. You know what I mean? Or at least guys who can play at a major league level, right? There's just something about having that guarantee that's really, really helpful. But can you get Chase McDermott? Can you get Dylan Beavers? Judd Fabian? You can absolutely get those guys. I think DeVries is going to be really great. And I think by the end of the season, I think you're going to see Cash Mayfield jump in the rankings a little bit too. I think he could be like a top 80 prospect by the end of the season. I think that overall, what we're going to see is that once again, the Padres farm system is going to be at least giving you something. And there are teams that have been worse than the Padres, not making nearly as many trades as the Padres, who I don't see that many prospects on the top list, right? Like, I don't see anyone from Oakland. You know what I mean? Not really, anyway. So that's where I'm at with DeVries. But not all. Ethan Salas for the Padres. This one's a little bold, but it almost entirely has to do with the fact that I think the Padres are desperate. I think the Padres will be pretty good this year. I do. And I think that Ethan Salas will debut at some time in the second half. I don't even think it's going to be like he gets the starting job. I don't even think it means he's going to be the backup. I just think he's going to have a moment, whether it be injury, whether it be Luis Campusano not playing well, whether it be Elias Diaz being very old. I think the Padres, because of their history, are going to get very desperate, and they're going to call this kid up. I really do. The only thing that could keep that from happening is if the Padres aren't good in the second half, they're going to be like, all right, why bother? Or if he is really, really struggling at whatever he ends up, whatever league he ends up in. I could see them promoting him after 2 weeks to the next level. I really could. So I think those are the only two situations. I think the Padres will be good, and I think they're going to be desperate, and I don't want this to happen. This is one of the only bold predictions on the list that I do not want to happen, right? I don't want it. Stop. Let him develop. This is important, right? But the fact that they weren't, super aggressive at getting a catcher in free agency, they were like, whatever, let's just get Elias Diaz for a couple bucks. Even though, catching was a real big mess for them last year. Outside of, it was a mess considering that a Higashioka breakout kind of season is what protected you, and then you just hit a bunch of home runs in the second half. I think that we see Salas. I really do. I don't think we should. I really don't. But I think that they can't help themselves. I think that that's what's going to happen in the second half. Also, for more predictions, guys, I think benches are going to clear. This is just a fun one. I think the benches are going to clear in the first game against the Dodgers this year. Now, it is a game later on in the season, but my thing is, I don't know, man. There's just something. I feel like the rivalry, the only thing about the rivalry that is true is while the Dodgers have gotten the better end of it, especially as of late, I'm just wondering about the Roki thing. And I'm wondering if at some point the Padres are like, these guys are annoying. Why did they contrive a story in the national media that just wants to, cave into whatever they desire to make our player look bad? And then you've got Dave Roberts just admitting, like, we don't care. I know that Manny Machado also addressed this at spring training recently. He's like, that's in the past, whatever. I believe him, but I don't think they think about it. I just think something could happen. I think something could be like they throw at a guy, things get a little bit antsy. I think this is clearly in baseball, next to Phillies Braves, like the big rivalry we have. Yankees Red Sox is not nearly what it used to be. Those teams don't have exciting enough players, although they do have Jazz, so maybe they will be this year. But overall, I think that's what's just a fun little prediction for you guys. And the last one is, I think the Padres are going to be very good this year. I think they're going to win 89 games or so. I think so. I think that's what happens. But I think they're going to miss the playoffs. I think they're going to be good and miss the playoffs. The reason for that is because I believe in universal weirdness, and I'm a big old fan of storytelling. What happened in 2020? They broke out. What happened in 2021? They had a huge choke in the second half. What happened in 2022? They squeezed in there with Bob Melvin, 89-win season, his first time there. And they were really effective in the playoffs, and they made that trade for Soto. They got Brandon Drury and Josh Bell and all that stuff, right? 23, what were they? Right? They only won 82 games. They were one of the biggest choke jobs that we've ever seen. Last year, 93 games. And then they made the playoffs, and then we saw what happened. The only kind of situation we haven't seen is them have a good team and then not make the playoffs. I think the big thing for this will be that the Dodgers are going to be untouchable. And I also think other teams throughout the National League got better, right? I think that that's kind of my big thing. And the D-backs, I think, are being exceptionally underrated. Exceptionally, right? That's kind of where I'm at. I think that this year, the Mets could still be very effective. I think that the Braves are going to be great. The Phillies are going to be great. I actually think that the Reds could be pretty good too. And then you've got the Cubs. I think that there's a lot of teams here, and I could see a world in which the Padres barely miss the playoffs because, frankly, it's the only outcome that hasn't happened yet, right? We haven't had great Padres season, except they didn't make it, right? We haven't, that's one outcome we haven't had. And we've gone back and forth from being great, breakout, to bad, to super disappointing, to amazing, to I think good. Somewhere in the middle will be they're good, but they won't make the playoffs. I know I don't mean to end the video on a sad note, but I just think that that's what's going to happen. I think that the NL West just got crazy this year. And again, by the way, this will be close. Like, I think that this could be like a down to the wire end of the season type of thing. I really do. I just think the D-backs got a lot better. I think the Cubs got a lot better. And I think that the Reds could be sneaky. And then I think Mets, Braves, Phillies are also going to be very good too. I could even see the Nationals just a tiny bit. I think the Nationals have a really good team. They've got some good prospects. I think it's going to be a tight race. Teams are going to be much better in the National League than the American League. And I think it could come down to, like, we haven't seen in a while, like, really come down to, like, the last couple weeks to determine the playoff spot. And I think this year it won't be their time. As I always talk about in sports, teams that make the playoffs, you will have some that made it and then fall out the next year. That's just how sports work, right? I'm not saying that means that the Dodgers will fall out or that the Yankees necessarily will fall out, those type of teams. But overall, those are my bold predictions for 2025, guys. Again, sorry to end on a sad note. Again, it might just be a 1-game difference. That's all it might be. I could be dead wrong on this. But I want it to be bold. I want it to be exciting. What can I say, folks? And I hope you enjoyed today's predictions for the 2025 season. I'm sure that I'll have many more and retinkerings as we get through the rest of spring training and continue the voyage to opening day. But guys, thank you for, as always, making Locked On Padres the best pod, including better than the Padres themselves. I messed up my own saying. The Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to your podcast, the podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast from. Tomorrow, we are talking with Michael Bauman of Fangraphs. Going to be a really, really fun conversation talking about Jackson Merrill's breakout season, whether or not it can continue in 2025, and whether or not this is, like, really, really special. Like, who are the players that he's getting compared to right now in terms of the data? All that and more. But until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friday Faithful homies, take care.